what do you think makes something a tale of our time?
I think something is a tale of our time if we can make a connection with it. And whether that's on a personal level, a political level, a social level, just something that we can relate to and have that connection with.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show where we discuss the stories that move us, what makes them so interesting, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle books, movies, podcasts, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and joining me today is Mary Kunce. Welcome. So, is there anything you would like to say to introduce yourself?
I'm a teacher. I teach fourth graders in Seattle, Washington, and I am entering my international travel phase.
Nice.
So that's why we are in Taiwan and just really taking advantage of the opportunity to travel.
So, I'm really grateful you've decided to come in and do an interview with me. So what story have you brought for us to talk about today?
So I brought the story, Never Let Me Go. And I'll let you say the name of the author.
Yeah, you said that was by the Japanese author, Kazuo Ishiguro.
And he won a Nobel Prize, actually, for this book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so he lived in Japan, but he lives in Britain.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the words in the book are British, so it's just really interesting. It's a meld of both cultures.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Can I ask you, do you know if this book was originally written in Japanese or English?
It was originally written in English, is my understanding.
I'm always interested with like bilingual authors, like what language they choose. I assume he's bilingual, but nonetheless, like what language they choose to start their work in or to like produce a work in, I think definitely will influence so much, at least behind the scenes, that we'll see in the story. So I'd love knowing that information.
Well, and he's also the author of The Remains of the Day, which is a very British book.
It sounds very British.
It is. It's a very British book.
Yeah. So, well, I have never read this book. I'm very excited to hear about it. So, Mary, for those of us like me, would you mind giving us a summary of Never Let Me Go? Hey, listeners, this is Amanda from the future, and this is actually the second spoiler warning for this book, the first one in history, but after discussing this story and kind of in our talks, Mary and I realized that this is actually one of the very few stories that is made better by not knowing what is going to happen in the book. So if you have never seen the movie and if you've never read the book, I would recommend skipping the summary. So from here until about 16 minutes, there are parts that are still left out. There are things that you can still discover after hearing the summary, and it is still a very good book if you do know the twist. And of course, we have an excellent discussion after this you can still listen to. But that would just be our personal recommendation to, if you have the chance, go check it out before you hear this, because the twist is very worth it.
It's been a while since I've read it, so I'm just going to preface by saying that.
Yeah.
But it's about a girl who we meet her when she's just finishing up at a boarding school. And we don't know a lot about her and her friends, and they get moved to this other place called the Cottages. And it's sort of weird because, it's almost hedonistic there.
Oh, okay.
So you're thinking,
in the cottages.
In the cottages. So
Okay.
you're sort of thinking this is just a normal coming of age story.
Yeah.
But it takes this kind of weird turn. And then as you learn more about the story, you discover that this is a group of people who are clones.
All of them.
All of them. These
Whoa.
young people. And they are only designed to give their organs to people.
Oh.
So they're raised to only be organ donors.
Uh-huh.
So they've lived this life, and they weren't supposed to find out, but the woman at the boarding school where they were at, the government's about to come in and shut down the boarding school.
The program.
Yeah, because apparently she was too kind.
Oh, that's never
the
a
people.
good sign
Never a
to
good
hear that.
sign.
We hate hearing that one.
So she actually tells them the truth.
Yeah.
So they go into the world knowing the truth, that they were only raised to be killed.
Yeah, yeah. Basically like human farming
Right.
at that point.
Right.
Wow. And so then that book is like meant to end with them going out into the world.
They go out into the world, and it's just about their relationship with each other, because there's a rumor that if two people fall in love, that they can get a deferral so they can live a normal life. So they go on sort of this car trip to the beach together and stuff, the three of them. And then there's
like a love triangle.
like a love triangle, exactly right.
Between these three clones.
Yeah.
Wait, can I ask you a question then? They're physical clones, because obviously they want to have, knowing the nature of this as it is, they would want to have like as much control over the organs they're getting as possible. But I assume, so did they all look the same? They don't.
No. So everybody has like a double out there.
Oh,
so
they're
they kind of
like
go,
someone in the real world.
Yeah, so part of this road trip is to go out and try to see if they can find their double, because there was a rumor that the double exists in this beach town.
This is already playing with like the belief of like doppelgangers and like all the juju that goes into that. That was my first, the little shiver that I had was like how it is supposed to be extremely bad for you to see your double out in the world. Like, so I can't imagine what that would be. But so it does make sense for them to kind of like, in that way, then I guess it makes sense for them to fall in love with each other, at least because it's not as much of like a mirror of yourself. Like everybody else who's in this program is compared to each other, an individual.
Right.
Right. They're not like carbon copies of each other.
Exactly.
Okay.
But the problem is before they get harvested for their organs, they become carers, which is very much a British word.
Yeah. What?
For the others. So this main character, Kathy, has to become the carer of her really good friend, who gives her first donation, and then she gives her second donation, and then she doesn't make it.
Who is like losing organs because they're just taking them.
So not only are you finding out that this is your whole life purpose, but before you can even be the person who gives the donations, you have to care for everybody else who is in the same position as you are.
Oh my God.
So you watch people die knowing that that's
going to
fate.
be your future.
Yes.
That's so dark. Where do I start? I still have so many questions. Oh my God. Okay. So at that point when she like becomes a carer, she already knows that she is going to become an organ donor.
Yeah, but she's trying to find a loophole.
Yeah. I would imagine you would be desperately looking for like any way out of this fate. These people who are raised for their organs, are they raised to give their organs to the person to the person they're a clone of? It could go to anybody.
It can go to anybody. The people who they are going to donate to are the upper classes.
Yeah, it's kind of like any of like Atwood's works in a similar vein. That's like Oryx and Crake, like that kind of thing. Okay. I also just like realized the answer can't be yes, because then they would know their doubles exist. They would all see their double before they died if that were the case.
Yeah, so their doubles really doesn't have
That's just
much
kind of like
to
a
do
rumor.
with it. Yeah.
Does Kathy get out of it, or does she fall victim to like the system she was always meant to be a part of?
So she has to care for the boy that she falls in love with. And she has to watch him die.
Never Let Me Go. That's
yeah,
where the
and then
comes
it
from.
ends.
This is
and
all coming together into a horribly sad puzzle.
Yeah, and then she has to accept her fate.
So she doesn't get out.
No.
I guess at
Not
that point.
I remember. Yeah. I don't think so.
But they would know, well, because then the loophole about like falling in love is then clearly not true either.
No.
Because they would have been allowed.
Right.
I'm assuming he loves her back, but then like they would have been allowed to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So then, like, what is the tone at the end of the story when you get there? Is it meant to be kind of like a bleak, like, this is just the way the world is and it is terrible? Or is there, like, I don't think the situation is ever going to be made better, to be clear, to put that out there. But, like, I think sometimes in books like this, they try to have the character at the end be like, well, I accept my fate and that's okay with me. Or is she, like, does that make sense? Like, is she fighting at the end, or is she just kind of accepting that this is going to happen?
You know, it's hard for me to remember because the thing about this book,
Yeah.
I don't remember the plot. I remember the feelings
Yeah.
of reading this book.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember just at the end, just feeling devastated.
Yeah.
So I think she does accept it.
Mm-hmm.
But all I really remember, because that's where his brilliance lies,
Mm-hmm.
is he takes you on this journey and he peels away the layers.
Slowly peeling back the
Slowly.
layers.
And you're like, so by the time you figure out what they're destined for,
Yeah.
you've so invested
Uh-huh.
in the story, in these characters,
Yeah.
that you're just like, is this really happening?
Mm-hmm.
But he does it in such a way that I think is where the Japanese part comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And the prose is so simple. And there isn't a lot there, but it's what is there is just devastating.
Kind of like an interplay between, like, what is and isn't said.
Yeah.
Is like the balance of it. Is like, we
Right.
say this because we are unable to or don't want to say
Yeah.
that. Oh, I actually, like, I just got goosebumps, like, thinking about, like, in the context of this story, we're like, hey, by the way, you're cattle. Like,
Right.
all that would, like, lead into in terms of, like, dialogue and, like, personal relationships with other people and, like, how you even view the world is, like, totally crazy, like, totally flips everything on its head.
Mm-hmm.
So you were blindsided when you got into this
Yes.
story in terms of, like, material. So what made this book so meaningful to you? There is so much to dig into. Like, I guess what really stuck out to you personally?
I just remember after reading it saying, I just read the best book I've ever read.
Mm. Was it because of what you said earlier about, like, how much emotion the book left you with?
Mm-hmm.
Or do you think that it has to do more with, like, the interplay of, like, how it was written? I guess, like, where do you think that really started for you in your memory of this book?
I think just the way he wrote it, it
Mhm.
was just so powerful. And like I said, just this combination of the two cultures
Mm-hmm.
that he's from,
Mm-hmm.
the Japanese simplicity,
Mm-hmm.
and then the British culture of hierarchy
Yeah.
and social status
Mhm.
and class.
Yeah.
And he just perfectly melded those two together
Mm-hmm.
in such a powerful way. And yet it was also a story about three young people
Yeah.
with their whole lives ahead of them, and just your realization
Yeah.
that you have no choice.
And also that, like, to that end, like, they don't have their whole lives ahead of them.
They
They
don't.
have, like, months,
Right.
if they're lucky. I'm assuming that, like, the organ market in this fictional world is as bad as it is today in terms of, like, people always need, like, we're fortunate enough that we live in a world where you could get a new organ to begin with, but obviously, ideally, like, this kind of thing isn't happening, so they're always in demand. So I can't imagine that they have, like, a long period of time that, like, after they learn this to
Right.
continue living.
And then you realize it as a reader.
Mm-hmm. Did they ever say it? Speaking of, like, the interplay between what is and isn't said, did they ever say that directly, or is that just one of those, like, horrible truths that comes
It
across
just
you?
washes over you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, God.
So the whole feeling as you read this book, and
Mm-hmm.
it's just slowly revealed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and that's why just I remember the feeling
Yeah.
of this book.
Yeah. I had to lean away from the mic because I was just, like, caught up in it. But, like, I actually think this is, like, one of my favorite, just, like, objectively, this is, like, one of my favorite genres of actually, like, horror movies.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like, and in that vein is kind of, and it's hard to describe, but I think this is exactly it. Is, like, not necessarily something that's, like, immediately scary, but one of those things where you have, like, the dawning dread or, like, dismay as you slowly realize like the full scope of a situation. I think that is like a really difficult to achieve, very kind of like artful thing to get done. Just a mix of all of these different things together.
And let me just add, the other part of it is that it just becomes clear that this society has made excuses for why they're doing this.
Of course.
They're not really human.
Yeah.
They're clones. So we shouldn't really care about them. And we don't understand why people are caring about them, or why they went to this school where they allowed them to have the arts and this amazing education.
Right. Like, why are we taking care of them if we're just raising them to die? Like,
right. And so there's this other really important aspect, I think, that speaks to class.
And like the nature of dehumanization.
Exactly.
Like how easy that is. 'Cause
yes.
like this is from the inside out. Right. But so often I think we experience that. Maybe that's also like why this, to me, would be like why this won a prize. Right. It's like we so often see that from the outside in. Right. Like being in the room where somebody says, whether or not you agree with it, but like everybody I think has been in a room where somebody makes a disparaging comment that you're kind of like, I don't agree with that fully. But like that's usually the way that we see it in our daily lives, is like from the outside in.
Yes.
But then this book is the exact opposite. It's these people who have no choice and like trapped in this world where we can see all these excuses people have made to distance them, to separate that. So usually I would ask, what do you think makes this a tale of our time? But do you think that that's it? Or do you think there's more that we haven't touched on?
No, I think it's the dehumanization. Absolutely. And in our times, it just is so relevant. And this is why, for me, travel is so important right now, because we're traveling to other countries and we're seeing parents taking care of their children. And it's the same all over. Making them laugh, taking care of them when they have a tantrum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's all the same, but there are people who want to dehumanize others.
Yeah.
And they just get this message over and over and over again. And they're programmed into thinking that they're not human.
Or that there's some large difference that can't be overcome.
Yeah,
whatever,
large difference.
whatever that is,
when it's not true. Everybody, they love their families.
Yeah.
They love their children. They love their grandparents. Everyone. They're living their life, and that's a commonality.
You remind me of this quote I heard recently. I wish I could remember exactly who said it, but like to that point, it was something along the lines of travel is the death of hatred, or something like that. Like travel is the death of bias. But like just getting to that idea of like it is so easy if you're in one place, if you don't have exposure to like all these different people, it is a very easy like trap to fall into, to believe these things people say because you don't see it. And in a lot of cases, it is something that like if you can allow yourself to experience different cultures, different people, different experiences, to even just like go meet people, right? Like it becomes so much harder to just believe like random lies because you've been there, like you've seen the experience, you can finally connect.
Yeah.
So
my motto is travel is a political act.
Oh, that's a really good one too. Wow, that's very powerful. Right before I was going to ask you for a one phrase. Well, let's get to that then. So the last question that I like to ask is if you could give, in this case, Never Let Me Go, a one phrase subtitle of your very own, what would that be?
We are all human. We deserve dignity, respect. There's not a lot that separates us.
Yeah. Well, Mary, thank you. I got emotional talking about this. This is very good. This was a good conversation.
Well, even though I've spoiled the book, I hope you read it.
Yeah. While worth not knowing, I still think that it would be a good book. If other listeners out there did like get the spoiler, you ignored the spoiler warning, which is what I did obviously here today as well, I think you should still go read it because I think the depth of talking about it is going to be inevitably different from the depth of reading it.
Oh,
like
absolutely.
Putting yourself in that position. So absolutely go out and look up this book. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have today. So thank you so much for joining me today. Thank you so much to everybody else out there for joining us here on Radio Taiwan International. This has been Tales of Our Time. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, with my guest, Mary Kunce. And I hope you enjoyed learning more about Never Let Me Go. We're all human. A tale of our time. We'll see you next time.